and welcome to episode 8 of This Podcast Cannot Continue. Can you believe we've done 8 episodes?
Yeah, I've been here for all of them, so I find it very believable.
I guess it's not really that big of a milestone. I feel like 8, though, is a number where we've now committed to it enough that we can keep going. If it was like 1 or 2 and then it like kind of dropped off, it would have been like, oh yeah, we tried, but 8's like a commitment. We have like 10 hours of audio,
and
literally.
In terms of iterative process, I think we're a lot better at it than we started. Like, if you want to like benchmark it, like this episode should at least be as good as Final Fantasy VIII.
Oh, that one, people didn't really like that one that much, man.
This is gonna be a bad episode.
Yeah, that's maybe not a good. Maybe not
but
a good.
But the bar is low.
What if we
was the last episode like awesome and it's gonna be like the fan favorite?
What if we use Dragon Quest VIII? Because Dragon Quest VIII was very well received. Lots of people like Dragon Quest VIII.
That's weird that we're talking about that, but okay.
What was it? Your topic? Well, your topic was first last time as I listened to.
Yeah, so you should definitely go first, but there is some Dragon Quest related stuff in my topic.
I love it when there's Dragon Quest.
I think you'll like it, or well, it's a discussion, not a. But yeah.
Was there any news this week that we want to get into? Just to flippantly address.
You know, I guess this is kind of strange, maybe, because it's not really important for us to talk about at all, but maybe, I don't know, maybe we can mention it. Do you remember there was a streamer and Minecraft speedrunner that we mentioned in the very first episode who was discovered to have been cheating the RNG in his Minecraft runs, Dream?
Yeah.
There's something going on Twitter and in like the live streaming sort of segment between Dream and Caseytron, and specifically it's that like Dream's fans have been like attacking and harassing Caseytron on Twitter because she said something negative about Minecraft or like stereotyped like Minecraft streamers or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's been going on for like several weeks, and they've got like her Instagram banned through like the automated like system that responds to mass reporting or something like that.
Okay.
And like Caseytron herself isn't like a completely clean slate figure. Like she's been a little bit controversial herself at times, but all the same, like I think that, you know, just to throw it out there now that we ourselves are creating content, that maybe content creators should be careful to like make sure that the community or fan base of like who they're producing their content for is like maybe told that they shouldn't be doing things like harassing other content creators or like fighting their content creators' battles for them, because it's not really like their place to do that.
It's tough though, because it's really hard to tell a bunch of people on the internet what to do. You know what I mean? I'm not excusing anybody's actions in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying, well, I agree with you that there is a certain responsibility if you have influence over a group of people to maybe be very clear that, you know, certain things are not acceptable. At the end of the day, also, it will be always a constant battle to keep certain people in check because you can't control who listens to you.
And if you have 1 million fans and you tell them not to do this, there's even if like a percent or my math sucks, but you know, then like there might still be 1,000 people that want to do it, and that's a number of people that can do some damage.
Right. Yeah,
I think like tough. For me though, the thing is like when there's silence from the content creators involved, which like in several cases throughout Twitch and YouTube and just the general like online gaming space, like content creator landscape through the landscape of that, there have been like lots of situations like this, and typically there's like, I can't control my community, it's out of my hands, instead of like actually saying to the community, don't do this shit. Because like, even if saying to the community don't do this won't like prevent it, I think it's still important that you take the step where you actually say it.
There is a responsibility to say something because I want to underline, I'm not trying to absolve people who have influence from any wrongdoing in situations, because obviously, as we see in a whole bunch of things outside of the gaming realm, that's not necessarily true. Like there is like, if you have a platform, there's a responsibility for you to be cognizant of the influence you do have over people. And I would say that, just a general rule would be to try not to cause too much harm, especially if you're creating content that's supposed to be fun for people. You know what I mean? Like it's always, I don't know. But like, I'm not sure. It's a tough thing. I've never had that influence, so I don't know. I just think,
yeah. I mean, we're small, right? Anyone who's listening to this knows that by now.
Yep.
Can
we influence people?
I'd like to hope it's. I'd like to hope it's not a mistake that we would also make in the future.
Yeah, well,
there used to be, also speaking of Twitch and pizza, there used to be, I don't know if it still exists, but I remember there used to be a thing, because there was a time, it's still kind of a thing. There was a time, though, I remember when, like, chargebacks, specifically for the purpose of, like, trolling, or because of, like, children first, like, getting parents' credit cards and spending money on streamers.
On donations, where they'd, like, give a big donation and then take it back.
So there was a time when streamers became pretty uncomfortable with donations, and there was, like, a service at the time that propped up called Stream Treat, and it was, like, you can order, like, the streamer puts in their information to it, and Stream Treat never shows the buyer, but you can essentially, like, buy your favorite streamer, like, a pizza or something.
So we
and it just gets ordered to their house.
Followers to give us pizza.
We gotta just set up Stream Treat next time we do Snester Days.
Is this going to be in the realm of acceptable influence manipulation then? Pizza.
The other thing too is we're not doing this thing out of the same location with each other, so it's like, which one of us gets the pizza?
Joking aside, content creators, I guess, should be cognizant of their influence, good or bad, and while they may not be able to directly control who they're talking to, I think the thing that they do have direct control over is their messaging and their actions, and once again, it's being cognizant of that, I think, is important in today, not in today, like in any specific way, I just mean like in today's like internet world, you know what I mean? It's just like when you're available on so many platforms, when you're a public figure, sometimes through your own creation or through like a viral trend, all of a sudden this kind of like new responsibilities thrust upon you, I think. And I don't know that everybody uses it the right way.
Well, yeah.
But man, that was like a weirdly like, that was like a deep aside.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily, that's why I said I don't necessarily know if it's something we should go deep into, because it's like at most tangentially related to a newsy kind of topic we talked about before that involved one of the same names, but I would just like to see it end up resolved amicably with like nobody.
For sure. Yeah, definitely.
I'd like to just see it all stop, because I've heard about it a couple times over the past week, and it's just like escalating.
This is kind of like a follow-up news segment on something we talked about in episode 1.
Essentially. All right, so you want to move into topics?
Yeah, I think this is a good one. I think I want to talk about what I've heard described on the internet as they call them boomer shooters. And it's FPSs. As we know, FPSs are huge deal. Everyone in games loves them. There's ones every year, and I'm not even talking just about Call of Duty. It's just they're, especially in like the Xbox 360, PS3 generation, there were a ton of third-person action shooters, of course, but also a lot of first-person shooters, right? But in the heyday of the 90s and early 2000s, there were also a huge, like everybody had a first-person shooter, and you had what was the engine called that a bunch of them ran on? Like there was Quake. Some of them ran, I think it was called Source Engine.
Yeah, Source is Valve's engine, Half-Life 2.
Yeah.
Was the original engine there. And actually, the Half-Life 2 engine has roots in like Quake engine as well. Because like the Half-Life 1 engine was a modified Source, Quake 2 engine.
And there's Doom clones and the various like Doom mods. There's just like, there's so many games back then that some of them were like, there were attempted reboots in the PS3, PS2 even, Xbox, original Xbox, Xbox 360 eras, but they're these realms of, they're fast shooters, they're guns, they're sometimes, like, maybe like funny in a way, and I don't necessarily mean Duke Nukem. We all know what a mess like Duke Nukem Forever was in terms of tone and just being like not funny in a bad way, like not even in an enjoyable way, really. It was just sort of like, ugh.
In my mind, Duke Nukem is like the epitome of kind of like jank. Like I've never thought that it was like quality. I've always felt that the thing that carried Duke Nukem was appealing to that sort of brand of I don't even know if I want to say humor. Do I want to say humor?
Yeah.
That brand of writing that will appeal to certain people.
But there are a lot of people who love the original Duke Nukem and also Duke Nukem, like Duke 64. And the reason why is because like Doom, the original Doom, and Doom 2, and Quake, and, if you want to go and you say stuff like Daikatana, or there's just so many. You're seeing a resurgence of these games in the indie scene, and you see studios like Night Dive bring these back. Like even games like Turok, Dark Forces was one that I played when I was younger. It's like a Star Wars Doom clone. It's like these big labyrinthian maps. You find the key to unlock a door to go do your next thing. They're the opposite of modern day FPSs. There's no recovering. There's usually like a very strict health bar. They're usually tough as nails, and your only real maneuvers are strafing and shooting. It's like kind of arcadey, but not. They're like the original LAN party. You could say modern day FPSs are more like refined, but I think that there's something that people really, really like about these. I don't know that boomer shooters is the right word for it. I just saw that.
Yeah,
I saw someone say that online. And honestly, the only reason why is because the people that grew up with these games are now in their 40s, maybe 50s, right? But like...
There's a line to draw between that and another sort of subgenre. And I think it's unclear which one we're talking about.
Well, I'm talking specifically about like, think of like your 90s LAN party.
Yeah,
games.
so I know that. So this is where things are getting twisted up, because you're talking about certain types of mechanics that feel like they're involved with like the campaign, and then LAN party suggests multiplayer. And I would consider
then let me
the
clarify.
resurgence. Okay.
I'm not necessarily talking about the multiplayer aspect of it. I'm actually just talking about that genre of game in general.
Right,
I know most of these games had multiplayer tacked on.
So this is the thing, though, is that it feels to me like this resurgence that you've mentioned, which, like, by the way, I think I would say that it all sort of started with a game called Strafe, which, from what I can tell, mostly actually disappointed people. I mean, it's 75% positive on Steam, which is like, it's a fine game, but I remember hearing a lot of reviews of it that like it wasn't what they wanted or expected out of it.
Just before you jump into this, because I want to hear this is going, because I think you're going to go to where I think you've inferred the question I was going to ask. There's a lot of setup.
Oh, there's a question that this is.
Yeah, I just didn't want to say boomer shooters and then just go off. I'm trying to do a thing where my topic is pointed so that we have I'm trying
a specific thing. Well, can I point out at least just the one thing at bare minimum that I think is like kind of being overlooked is that all those like kind of older, like you can't mention LAN party unless we're including the multiplayer. And I think that the modern resurgence of this genre has been omitting multiplayer. And so like the arena shooter subgenre, which is when you take like Quake 3 and you're not playing a campaign, you're playing online, right? And there's been a lot of takes on the arena shooter genre since then that have been like derivative of that, whether it be also Unreal Tournament has been an arena shooter, right? And then we have things like Warsaw and Reflex and stuff like that. So like the arena shooter has been like dying and like really suffering. Like there's like no real like active arena shooter that's like has a big population right now. Like it's a genre that's been left behind, but it is like intrinsically tied to this quote unquote boomer shooter genre because it has been like the multiplayer derivative of that. And yeah, the modern resurgence has been largely excluding like the arena shooter aspect. Like none of these games would be an arena shooter because they're all like largely single player.
Okay.
So it's kind of weird, right? But anyway, so what's the question though? I want to know so that we do indeed stay on topic. But I just wanted to mention that.
No, definitely. I might have to refine it now. Actually, saying that because I'm realizing that I said like the Source engine and you mentioned Half-Life 2 and maybe even like the original Half-Life, and I don't know that those are like on the tail end of the kind of game that I'm talking about. I'm kind of more talking about the kinds where it's like
earlier.
Yeah, like Wolfenstein, like the original Wolfenstein, Doom, like, you know, where there's a lot of sprite work and 3D environments. Those kinds of like 90s sort of shooters, I think. Also Quake, there's evidently going to be some 3D games in there, but that kind of vibe. I think you know the genre that I'm talking about. It's more like a feeling than it is like a strict like this game is and this game is not. But anyways, the question I was trying to that I want to get to the bottom of is why do you think they're coming back at all? Is it a nostalgia wave that now people, for example, our age that grew up with these games on their computer are now older, more disposable income? They have lived through generations of games that tried to evolve the shooter into something more realistic or more this or more that, and they're kind of just wanting something familiar. Is it that modern shooters they went too realistic and now it's there's too many moving pieces and they just want something point and click and shoot and fast? Why do you think they're kind of coming back? Because I do think that you have some studios really specializing in them. You have a lot of indie companies making them.
What's the name of that studio that did a presentation in, I don't know if it was E3. I think it might have been part of the Devolver Digital presentation. It was like one studio came up and said that they were like publishing like literally 3 of them.
Yeah.
And and they had like this funny I remember their URLs were really funny. Like one of their URLs was like not, I don't know. One of their URLs was like not Fortnite.com.
Yeah. Cuz I know that Night Dive does re-releases of...
It was New Blood Games.
New Blood.
And and you know what I did? I went to notfortnite.com and it's a Medieval, Ultra Kill, and Dusk, and I think all 3 of these games are kind of in maybe this, as you're calling it, boomer shooter genre, right?
Yeah, they are, but they're like new ones. Or so I saw someone online the other day play. Someone made a Doom mod, and it's Castlevania for NES as a Doom game. So instead of a gun, you whip, and all the Castlevania enemies come at you, and they've made 3D interpretations of Castlevania levels, and it's weird. Like, people are making these. Someone made a Splatterhouse Doom mod. And there just seems, and I know that the Doom modding community has been around for a very long time, and there's like a long history there.
For ages.
Yeah, but I do think that you're starting to see some of these things now turn into their own games by these solo developers, indie developers, and they're being published and released, and it's kind of becoming this next, I don't want to say it's like the new fad, because I don't think that that's fair, but I've noticed that there's a lot more games like that than there are being made of like shooters from the mid 2000s era. So what's the appeal? I like them. I find them really fun.
I think you touched on a lot of the key points. Like, I think it's true that there's a contingent of people who were gaming in the 90s and playing like these games like Quake and Doom and things like that, and feeling like the genre was left behind. Like, you can see this sentiment a lot on Reddit, where it's like, the cover shooter and like regenerating health, and it's like always treated negatively.
Yep, pretty much.
Yeah, and then sort of like I think that it could be a response to that perception, but I also think that at the same time, it can still be appealing to people who didn't play this type of game in its original sort of era, because, like, say you never played one before and you've only been playing like cover regen health shooters. Like, wouldn't this feel like almost like a breath of fresh air in comparison, just because it's different?
It might feel very hard. I know a lot of these games are like usually pretty strict on the health packs and everything. So even though they seem more simple because they don't have the cover maybe, or they don't have the same type of combat options, they're usually tough as nails. You really have to, it's like almost a resource management aspect to it.
Yeah, definitely. And particularly to bring it back around to like arena shooters, I think one of the reasons why arena shooters are gone and aren't making a comeback in this like new modern subgenre that calls back to those days is because in multiplayer, arena shooters are all about like like timings and an advantage in a way that's like very difficult to perceive and like learn for yourself the first time around. Do you know what I mean? So it's like there's always some kind of movement mechanic, whether it be derived from like the Quake 3 bunny hopping, which is essentially a manipulation of that game's like physics engine, where if you are doing certain things with your motion, like repeatedly jumping, and you're doing like strafe jumping, so it's like when you're moving the mouse left or right while holding that strafe key, and like typically I think not forward, you can actually like gain speed as long as you continue jumping while you do it, right? And so like using these advantages, which is like a skill to be able to do that, you can then get to places on the map before your opponent where there may or may not be a power up. And then like the next part of the mental game is tracking the power-ups. Like I know I got armor 47 seconds ago, and like in 17 seconds, because they're 30 seconds apart, there's this I can go get, and then I can loop back to the armor. So you're always planning your route around the arena, the map that is an arena essentially, to like hit the power-ups. And like when you have power-ups and your opponent doesn't, you have advantage. But if your opponent can pick you off and get a kill, that can buy them time to get to a power up, and then they get it. So there's a shifting sort of like back and forth of advantage. They're usually played 1v1, at least in like super competitive formats. There's like team versions and all that too. But
sure,
I think that mental game is very hard to access for the first time compared to like team deathmatch in like a cover shooter.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like from what I've experienced in like more modern FPS titles is a sense of like manipulating and like knowing where like the spawns are. So I remember playing some multiplayer Destiny 2 with like my cousin, who in particular is very good at like saying, you know, we've killed X amount of their team, but if we push forward, what happens is they can no longer spawn at that point if we're too close to it, and then they'll spawn somewhere else. But like if we stay here, they're guaranteed to like be in front of us, and then we can like hold the 2 points behind us. So like he's very good at manipulating our positions to ensure that the enemy spawn positions are like certain ones. So it's like there is a mental game that is played in those modern shooters, but I think it's very different than like dynamically planning a route around your map that is based on the timers of power-ups. Like I think one of those things is a lot more accessible than the other one, even if both of them are like the advanced form of strategizing in the genre.
Sure. That's purely on the multiplayer side though. What's the appeal in general? And I got an example here. I would say that Doom 2016 is a modern day 3D game based very firmly in the 90s because it successfully recaptured, like that game was a huge hit.
Yeah.
It totally captured the vibe of those games, well, not just it like
leaning on the aesthetic.
Yeah.
I mean, there is nostalgia to be felt in Doom 2016 and Eternal,
100%.
But it's not the same as like the aforementioned like Dusk, Ultra Kill, a Medieval, Strafe, etc., where like visually it looks like it belongs in the era, which is extremely common in this new take on the genre.
I also think that's just
especially
because,
for the indies, but
I think that's just because the it's an accessible art style that's also aesthetically pleasing because so many people have a nostalgia for it. You know what I mean? It's not like that out of.
So I'm just making the argument that it doesn't have to completely be rooted in nostalgia, at least visually.
Right.
If you can do it at modern fidelity and people still buy it. That's all I'm really saying there.
Gotcha. Yeah, because
I think that gameplay, like, because you can be nostalgic for like a gameplay loop, I suppose, right? And so then, as a result, I think that there may be an element of nostalgia in it, no matter what it looks like.
Yeah. Well, I just think I like the open puzzle box sort of levels where you're given a play area and almost in an adventure game-esque way, you usually have to locate a key or something to make something else happen so you can access another floor or another passage to go to the next part. You know, not a lot of these levels are just tunnels, which I know is a common complaint of a lot of modern-day gallery shooters,
the hallway shooter.
Yeah. Both have their place. I think that there's reasons why cinematic experiences have to funnel you into themselves in that way. And I think that can be done in a smart way. I know it's not a shooter, but like I think Uncharted really does that in a smart way because it's very cinematic and is compelling to continue to play, despite the fact that it's pretty much a giant hallway and some galleries. But when you think to these old games from the 90s, there's just something about there's an exploration element in them without them being an adventure game. You know what I mean? But also they're quick. Like people who are really good at them can just blow through Doom levels, a couple minutes maybe per level. So it's kind of like about learning where to go, knowing what to do. I don't know. It's something it's almost in between like old console games and memorizing stuff like you would in like Mario or Mega Man, and also like a modern game. You know what I mean? It seems like a weird in between like 3D platformer and side-scrolling shooters like Contra and stuff, and then modern day full-on FPSs or third-person shooters. Like it was like a weird stepping stone where it had feet kind of firmly in the future, but also in terms of philosophy, sort of firmly in the past. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think I think people miss that because what they're missing from the in quotation marks the old days isn't present in the new shooters, but what makes like pre first person shooter games hard to go back to, or even like really really early ones, is that they're not always modern enough to be like intuitive playing experiences, or they don't quite function right. So I think these indies are really filling this vacuum of creating sort of like, it's like when people nowadays make 80s themed like synthwave music. Like that genre didn't really exist in a popular format, I don't think, back in the 80s. There was like pieces of it in stuff, but what people are taking inspiration from are like, like training videos and like mall music and stuff like that. That wasn't really considered like something that people like listened to, but they're taking that and they're turning it into like modern day music genres. And I think in the same way, modern day shooter creators are taking this nostalgia for a genre and updating it just enough, but also popularizing it and making it feel like you remember the old games feeling like, even though they're not. Actually, you know what? To be completely honest, that point is obvious anyways, because that's basically what indies do, even with like 8-bit graphic games and like,
with a lot of different, indie games have been able to capture genres that the rest of the industry have moved past, or are afraid are not commercially viable and wouldn't otherwise fund. And so I think it's fantastic. But I'm just trying to, I guess, play the foil to that argument. I just do want to say that I think all of it completely has merit and doesn't have to be completely like leaning on nostalgia.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think what I was trying to say was they are sort of making games that you could go like, oh, I remember this one, but it never existed. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's borrowing heavily on the vibe, but updating it enough.
And likewise, I think that now I don't know. I don't have any statistics. I haven't spoken to anybody about this. So I don't know. I'm making kind of a blind supposition here, but I think it's likely that there's a lot of young people who are probably enjoying vaporwave and weren't around for a lot of the things that vaporwave itself is referencing. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if there's a lot of like, I'm not saying like tons and tons and tons. Like, it's not trending like TikTok is, but like, I wouldn't surprise me if there's like a fair amount of teens who are like, who landed on vaporwave in like the YouTube algorithm, because it has been successful in that algorithm, and been exposed to it and have like connected with it or enjoyed it or something, even though they missed the time that vaporwave really likes to pull on, right? So
totally, yeah. Well, because
like mall wave or all these like sort of related things as well. Sure.
It's because of the aesthetic. I think you see these modern day indie shooters in this sort of new genre, and you see the sprite animated enemies and everything in this 3D plane. You go like, oh, this is a look, and then you're aware of Doom, for example, and you see Doom, and you go, oh, okay. it makes sense. And then it feels, even if you didn't have experience with Doom, you get it. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like you play Celeste and then you see Super Mario Bros. 3 and you go, okay, yeah. They're different games from completely different eras, but you see the lineage and you get the appeal, and pixel art platforming games completely different once again. But I also think another reason why they're so successful, man, is because in today's era of pushing those FPSs, not first-person shooters in this case, but frames per second and performance, these throwback games don't take much to go, and they go fast.
Yeah.
They go real fast, and you can run them on a potato. It's, for the most part.
Yeah, you can 100% enjoy that 144 FPS or above experience with these without having to have like a 3090, if that exists yet. I haven't been keeping track of GPUs since they're all basically. Do any of them really exist?
Who knows? Not right now. They don't. They're impossible to find. But so I think that there's another thing that these people out there looking for like faster, more like, Twitch, not in the streaming platform, but like, these Twitch shooters, things to like
concept.
Yeah. They want this fast action, and these games are just delivering it. I just think that there was this vacuum that modern day shooters left behind. And that's
absolutely,
that's what I think is filling the case.
I mean, I think that goes back to the thing about like the major, publishers seem to have moved past it, I would assume, because they thought it wasn't commercially viable. Some innovation came. Every game has to follow that innovation because, Call of Duty, Modern Warfare was a massive success or whatever. And then like the formula just changed. And yeah, you're right. It got left behind, right? But I'm
glad to see it's coming back, though, because it's fun. That's the one thing that I
think there's also ways, again, to bring it around back to multiplayer. Like,
okay.
Not that I can say that it's a complete version thereof, but I would say that Halo has always generally hybridized the arena shooter, particularly more the like Unreal Tournament feeling of it rather than the Quake feeling of it, but has hybridized the arena shooter with more like hit scan type guns and stuff like that. But they've always had like power weapons. They've always had grenades that have like stickies and like kind of wild effects. And the vehicles in particular are something that like Tribes, the Tribes series, and UT had vehicles too, right?
I don't remember my experience with that. Was
actually, I'm kind of thinking
the PlayStation
maybe it
version.
Didn't. Yeah, but all the same, like some of these elements made appearances in some of the larger scale like game modes of more old school FPSs and like remained in Halo to this day.
Halo actually is, the first Halo is a really good example of one that was right on the cusp of being both. Because it had feet firmly in both worlds, very, very much so. I remember playing the Halo free trial on Windows because you could play Blood Gulch as much as you wanted to with my friends. That was pretty rad. You could even mod it. People were in there with, like, it was still Blood Gulch, but all the vehicles were there. They'd swap out the weapons. It was actually kind of awesome. That's getting off topic, though.
I mean, I know I just keep going back to it, but I just really want to make sure that at least I impress upon how much I would love to see this happen for the arena shooter genre, like multiplayer, so to speak. Because, again, that largely hasn't happened, and that's a genre that is honestly kind of in a painful place. And I think that's largely to do with the inaccessibility of it.
But what I find so weird
and
about
I don't know what the solution is, but I really want to see it happen.
What I find weird about it being, you saying it being inaccessible, though, is because I think part of the reason why these old games are so fun is because they're so fast, they're so quick, and a lot of it really, to me, feels like it's once again that sort of they distilled the genre back away from all of the intense stuff that modern shooters do, and it's just back to movement and shooting. And then after that, everything's execution, and it kind of brings to mind something like Rocket League. Like I think that those kinds of shooters have more in common with Rocket League than they do with modern Call of Duty, because it's like a sport. It's pure execution. Your will versus theirs. I'm not saying there's not execution in modern day FPS esports, it's that it's a different kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're talking Pong versus football. If modern day Call of Duty is super intense as to say it's football and there's plays and you have to organize a team and do all that kind of stuff, what we're talking about is like Pong. It's two people one-on-one maybe back and forth, and it's almost like a quick draw, a Wild West quick draw. Whoever messes up first loses kind of gameplay. You know what I mean? I think that's really awesome, and I do agree with you that there's not a lot of examples of that nowadays, and maybe it should come back. There's a vacuum. So even though we've identified that these games are filling a vacuum, there's still a vacuum.
Yeah, it seems like it.
It's vacuums all the way down.
I think they're really cool, and I definitely want to play more of them, and I'm glad that you brought this up because I'd forgotten all about the New Blood trailer that talked about their 3 games from... I want to say it might have been E3, but they just had that hilarious commercial. Like, even at the top of their website, it says, "We love you and we hate money." And I mean, I don't believe that. But at the same time, you know, they've...
But you do get a sense that some of these games are being made out of a genuine love for the style, which is kind of fun because it's almost like these games to me are like the metal music of video games because the people that make them also really love them, and they would be like... If you've ever met anybody who's in a metal band, they would be in a metal band whether they were trying to be famous or not. You know what I mean? They just love playing metal with their buds sometimes. You know what I mean? It's a weird sort of just like expression of music in that case. And I think these shooters are just like people who just really like these shooters and they really like playing these shooters and they just want to make them because that's what they like. And so even though you're saying like, you know, the we hate money is... You know, how true can that be? They're technically a company. It's like, I agree with you, yes, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of these people would still be making, you know, Doom mods or Half-Life mods, even if they didn't have a company. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you touched on that at the beginning, and there's truth in that for sure.
Okay.
I would say it more like they need money to do what they're doing. Like, you know what I mean? It's like they may hate money, but... they're not going to say no to it if it means they can make their games. Maybe it's that. Because you're right. It seems like ultimately what they want is to be able to make their games. So, yeah.
Isn't that what anybody wants? To make...
any game developer, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, I think that's a good wrap on that one. So let's move on to topic 2. What do you got going on? Because you're talking Dragon Quest, and as much as I love talking about old school shooting games, old school shoot 'em ups, I also love Dragon Quest. So yeah, your topic and some of the things we touch upon might inform the answer to my topic, which also is sort of positioned like a question. So I've said to you before, in private conversation, that I believe Super Mario RPG is like... it is, and in this over the course of this conversation, maybe this might turn into was, or still is, but also was, like the optimal game to introduce a newcomer to a JRPG. Not Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, which is literally why that game was created.
Honestly, no.
No, I know. Honestly, no. Obviously.
So I know you're kind of cracking.
Because that game kind of stripped out all of the parts that make JRPGs fun, or RPGs in general.
So what I want to position is, that game is not the most accessible. I don't mean like accessibility in the same way that I was talking about arena shooters, but more in the sense that it's a very expensive Super Nintendo cart. It's on the SNES Classic Mini.
Yep. Is it?
But I don't. Yeah, it is. But I don't know where else it exists. Like I know it's not in the Switch. Console. Is it Wii U Virtual Console? I'm so hesitant to say because
Okay, don't quote me on that. Don't at me.
It's
anybody.
A little hard to
know.
get at. It's a little hard to get at now, which makes it a little difficult to recommend if you are trying to recommend like gamers first JRPG, right?
For sure. Would you say Paper Mario is a useful backup though? Because Paper Mario is real good.
Problem is, I would maybe only say 64 or Thousand Year Door because beyond that we start. Yeah, beyond that we start to get into a situation where they move so far away from like sort of the JRPG core that if it's about introducing someone to the genre, that that the later ones wouldn't really fall in that line. So then when we look at Thousand Year Door and 64, it's almost more difficult.
I meant specifically 64 because 64 almost feels like a direct spiritual successor to the SNES
Yeah,
game.
agreed, yeah. If anything, I almost would wonder if like Mario and Luigi, like Superstar Saga or something, just because there's the DS remake, and that's probably the easiest to find out of anything we've mentioned so far.
Presentation, not so much, but in terms of spiritual successor, like, yeah. Paper Mario 64 is so wildly close to what Super Mario RPG is doing, though, that it's insane.
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm thinking, though, is that a modern alternative available on tons of systems is like, what if Dragon Quest XI was sort of like the currently accessible, easy to buy by almost anybody, like game that could be like the candidate of like a starting point for somebody that's never played a JRPG before. And it's kind of funny maybe to say that about a game that's from a franchise that is like sold itself by staying extremely close to its roots, which would suggest that it's like for the people that are like really hardcore about like an old school stripped down JRPG experience, but in being an old school stripped down JRPG experience and yet having some of the modern features that Dragon Quest XI includes to modernize it, that also make it more accessible and like feel like it doesn't have to seem so old school, even though it at its core is like simple Dragon Quest formula. Like I think that kind of makes it like a really ideal package if somebody's like, I've never played a JRPG before. Like,
yeah, okay,
how do I get into the genre? Like, so, I would love to hand somebody my copy of 11 and be like, try this.
I got some ideas on this. First off, I love 11 like a lot. I think it's fantastic. The funny thing I always hear when people talk about Dragon Quest is they always go, well, the combat's the same as it's always been, and it's old school style. And I always kind of go, well, what do you mean by that? Because in my mind, what Dragon Quest has done over the years is taken something and just every iteration of Dragon Quest just turns the knobs just a tiny little bit, getting ever so closer to a more perfect version of itself. And the reason why Dragon Quest XI is such a funny version of this game is because there's so many references to past Dragon Quest games in it that it's almost like a greatest hits of itself. In a fun way. It's a celebration of the series. It really is sort of like a anniversary game for a lot of reasons. Some that I don't want to ruin for people, but it's just so by the time you get to 11, to me the play style, even though it feels old and feels very reminiscent of those old games, if you go back and play them, it's just tweaked enough. The battles and the HP of the enemies is tweaked just enough. What the spells do is tweaked just enough. The interplay between buffs, debuffs, it's all very basic, but it's like a watchmaker's finest work. You know what I mean? All the little pieces just move together.
But that's sort of what I mean. Like that's not in disagreement with my argument. Yeah, I may not have expressed it perfectly.
Right.
But
I guess what I'm saying is I'm trying to dispel the idea that just because it feels old school means that it's going to be bad or out of date. What I'm saying, I think, is that Dragon Quest actually is weirdly perfect in its own
because it's
kind
so
of way.
Iterative.
Yeah. So they've just been refining this like one recipe for years. And on 11, there's arguments that past Dragon Quest games maybe are other people's personal favorites and stuff like that, and that's all fair. But I think that it's hard to say that 11 isn't one of the snappiest, best feeling ones that they've ever done. It may be the best Dragon Quest game. Whether or not it's your favorite Dragon Quest game is a different story. The only thing I would say about it being someone's first JRPG is it's really long. Like, I love that, but man, like, having someone sit through that game, if that was their first thing and they've never played one before, that might be crazy. Because Super Mario RPG is
considerably shorter.
Yeah, it's like 20 hours. My full honesty, my playthrough of Dragon Quest 11 was 85 hours.
Mine was over 100.
Yeah, well, someone's driving a motorcycle out my window.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, it is a really good game, though. You're completely right, and it has a whole bunch of quality of life improvements that make it super accessible for anybody nowadays. And it's also a very polished, experience. There's not a whole bunch of weirdness. Because I think if you would have asked me this a while ago, I would have said, like, well, just play the game everybody always talks about. Just play Final Fantasy VII. Because that was lots of people's first entry point, and then that'll be great.
Yeah, and 7's an excellent game.
But it's weird.
But I'm not going to say...
There's a lot of weird stuff in there.
I'm not going to pretend that I can't imagine a universe wherein somebody plays FF7 as their first JRPG and gets put off a little bit.
Well, yeah, the graphics didn't completely age super well. I love them, but some people are instantly turned off by that.
Awkwardness of localization as well could be a thing.
Okay. What about, can I put in Chrono Trigger?
Yeah, Chrono Trigger is a good choice too. And unbelievably, more accessible than my sort of than SMRPG.
It's also, what I mean? Because it's also not much longer.
Yeah, you can find it on like mobile on Steam, all these versions.
It's not super difficult, but it is very fun.
However we may feel about them.
It's got that. It's almost got that Dragon Quest watchmaker perfection in terms of its mechanics. It's not as deep as Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy, but what it does have all interlocks really nicely.
In terms of Chrono Trigger, what I wonder is how easy it would be to put that in front of. Okay, let's say you have like I don't know. It's really hard to say. I want to say like I want to create a scenario like let's say you have like a situation where you have like a 14-year-old like niece or nephew or something like that. Is like how well is Chrono Trigger going to go over? But then again, we can't if it's a young person, how are they going to sit through 100 hours of JRPG? But I mean,
you're talking about just like
right?
what it looks like because I think Chrono Trigger does have a very like
not just what it looks like, but also sort of like the opening premise and stuff like that. Like Chrono Trigger, I think appeals to people. So Chrono Trigger, I think would have a better hook or appeal to people that are already a little bit into the genre, like story theme.
Okay.
Like
yeah,
and I want to say aesthetic without talking about graphical like fidelity or like being a SNES game and like looking like a SNES game, like all of that aside, even just in terms of like its aesthetic from like an art direction standpoint, like it feels like it would more easily capture somebody that's already played a JRPG or two rather than somebody who's like, what is this?
See, I think that you're probably right on that. I also do think that if it was someone's first game of this variety, that they would also dig it because I do think it tells its story in such an interesting way that it is not obtuse or difficult to get into it because by the time it gets complicated, there's already been a breadcrumb trail of where it's going, sort of in a way, and then it offers you enough on repeated playthroughs that if you want to dive a little bit more into it, it also has
extra stuff to do
that you could kind of flesh it out a little bit more, which is fun. I just think it's such a good game, and the one thing that it has going for it over Dragon Quest is the fact that it's not as long.
Well, okay, and so here's one more argument about length is like, does the length actually matter if it's about somebody's first foray into the genre where no matter what the length is, there's a possibility that they will never finish whichever game you put in front of them, right? And then, but if they are hooked, then they're hooked, and wouldn't they go all the way? Like, do you kind of see what I'm trying to say? Like, if this is about putting a game in front of somebody to say, like, do I or could I or would I like this genre? Like, could the first 10 or 20 hours of Dragon Quest XI make the argument within that time? And if the person doesn't like it, would they still know that they don't like the genre even though they didn't finish the game? Right. Or if they do like it, how likely are they to go on and finish the game despite its length?
So I think
do you know what I mean? So does that actually weigh in? Or if you recommend the person the game, but you don't necessarily put upon them the expectation to finish it, does it still work as an entry level piece, or is the length still just too daunting?
So I'd argue that they'd have more fun with Chrono Trigger because Chrono Trigger has the whip crack speed of a Formula One racer. Its pacing is so good that you can't play it for more than 10 minutes without doing something that's advancing the plot.
You experience more plot,
but also abilities
moments, I guess, or more plot. You experience more plot points in the same amount of time.
But also set pieces, battles, things get doled out quicker. All of that. Dragon Quest is great.
It takes its time.
It's also episodic because you know that Dragon Quest does that thing where every town you go to has its own story. So every town, if you think of it like a TV show, every town is sort of like
that
its
first
own
episode better be good if you're taking that strategy as
it's all like an arc. Whereas Chrono Trigger is like an action movie almost. It goes and goes and goes and doesn't stop. And while I totally understand your point, because I think there are two different kinds of people. Someone will run into Chrono Trigger and go like, I don't know what's happening. This is all just happening too fast. But another person will run into that as their first JRPG and go, this is the best. This is rad. Whereas somebody else will look at Dragon Quest and go like, this is a fun hangout. I think
what I'm trying to say about the aesthetic, I'm bouncing back and forth between different aspects of this conversation, but it kind of came to mind. I think one of the things about the aesthetic that I almost want to put forward is like, while both of them, funny enough, have like the Toriyama like influence in their look.
Oh yeah, I guess it's true.
I feel like when you pick up Chrono Trigger, you look at it and it's like, it's deeper in like the nerd spectrum. Well, I don't know if that's true at all, but I almost want to say that like,
I think it's more well known than Dragon Quest, weirdly enough.
Yeah, definitely. But I want to say that like Dragon Quest, well, in the West, I want to say that Dragon Quest, like, it's more cartoony presentation, even though like, okay, so like in terms of like box art and like all like the associated materials, yeah, we have like we have a very similar like look or presentation. But in terms of like what you actually are looking at when you're looking at the game, like to me, Chrono Trigger feels like it has more of that like deeper nerd appeal, whereas like Dragon Quest is something that I could also imagine putting in front of like somebody who like isn't really much of a gamer, but they watched some like anime, like they watched like a Miyazaki movie once or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
yes,
they might
feel that.
Can like be able to understand like what it's doing, like in terms of like look and aesthetic and like at least how initial story beats are presented.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know how powerful or like I don't know how much weight what I'm trying to put my finger on here that has in like the equation.
Okay. So here's something I'm gonna put forward.
It's a difficult. Yeah. Go ahead.
So on a spectrum here, we have I would say on the accessible side, both of these games are pretty in the center between being like kind of more fully formed deep JRPGs, if you will, especially Dragon Quest. Maybe Dragon Quest a little bit more than Chrono Trigger, but both are still very firmly in the center of this spectrum for accessibility. I'm going to go out to the extreme ends. I'm going to say, if you want to do a trial by fire and or a wade someone into the shallowest end of the pool first, for shallow end of the pool, give them a Pokemon game. In fact, for the shallowest end of the pool, give them Sword and Shield, because if they enjoy
that. I forgot
that
about Pokemon, and most people have played. Most people don't even almost realize that they've touched the JRPG genre in some form.
If they like Pokemon and they want more of that, but not necessarily always battling monsters, you can give them. I would say you could give them Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest or Chrono Trigger or anything after that, and they might think that's way
almost
cooler.
Any one of them, yeah.
Or also on the monster collecting side of things. If you want to throw someone in the crazy deep end, if you want to throw someone in the crazy deep end,
are you going to say SMT?
Yeah, I was going to say just give them SMT4 or Strange Journey. Just give them Shin Megami Tensei.
Here you go. Here's Strange Journey.
Yeah, have fun losing every single battle all the time. Nothing here likes you, and you have to talk to monsters, and they all kill you in one hit. Because here's my argument there. If they like that, actually, you know what? This is a bad argument, because if they like that, they might not like any other JRPGs. Because I could totally see somebody who's a diehard SMT fan playing Chrono Trigger and going like, yeah, it's okay, but like this is like, where is all of the systems? Where's the this is easy stuff.
And JRPGs are sort of games about systems when you think about it from like a game design perspective. Like you don't focus so hard on like narrative and things like that.
I've told you this before about
all to varying degrees, though.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say I told you this before when we were playing FF one time, that like all the PlayStation 1 RPGs, the big thing that they would have on the back of the box, what they'd advertise, was whatever their battle system did that the other guy didn't, So you had Final Fantasy, and then Final Fantasy 7, for example, and then Final Fantasy 8, they had the junction system, which was just completely all over the place. And then 9 was this throwback to 6, kind of. And you had Chrono Trigger, which had random battles on the screen, but no level ups. And you didn't really like spells were like consumables, but they were only consumed in a battle, and you could use them again later. Like next battle, they just had like you could only use like each one once a battle for the most part. There are exceptions to that, and it had like this terrain system, and then you have Grandia, which has this command, like almost like an active battle time command thing, but it's like a racetrack on the bottom, and you can interrupt enemies if you get your attack in before they do, and it like. Vagrant Story had you could attack different parts of the body, almost like a Fallout VATS kind of thing. Like every RPG had this like really Xenogears
marketable system.
Yeah, Legend of Gaia had
that made it unique.
Combos. Legend of Dragoon had you pressed the button at the right time, almost like Super Mario RPG actually, and you did more damage.
Oh yeah, timed hits. Doesn't 8 have timed hits? And it's they're not called limit breaks, are they? What are they called?
Oh no, 8. So Final Fantasy 8 did a great thing where everybody's limit break functioned differently, but Squall, no matter what was happening at any time,
trigger, right?
You could trigger and get extra damage off of the gunblade if you timed it right, and that you could just do that whenever you wanted.
Any of his actions, not just his
just his normal attack.
Oh, just so not off his like limit breaks. Or
in his
like
limit
abilities?
break, it was very explicitly said that that's what you should do.
Okay.
There's like one character at the start of the game who says like, make sure you hit the trigger when you attack to get extra damage. But Squall's the only character it works on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you just had like all these different battle systems. Like nobody could just pick one because and Tails, of course, was just doing its usual Tails thing.
Action combat sideways at the time.
And it's awesome. Like that's so that's so rad, but it's also very strange. It was a weird time.
So
I kind of derailed your whole point. I forget where you were going.
No, it's okay. So I think that like the conclusion that we're landing upon is like something that was always true, even if Super Mario RPG was extremely accessible. And I was still saying that it's like the ultimate game that you should introduce somebody to JRPGs with. I still think that no matter what, you have to, when you like, if you're going to make a recommendation to somebody, you have to be particular about like their tastes. Mm-hmm. So perhaps like in conclusion, more than any one game being the ultimate, like newcomer to JRPG, like recommendation, that instead there should be like a concise list that can, cover a couple of different categories of personality type or person, or like what experience they may or may not have with like other types of media or games or whatever. And then, I would even argue that it could probably be as low as like 4 or 5 games.
Well, I would say,
and Pokemon was something that I completely overlooked and should absolutely have a spot on such a list, right?
It would be a very hard argument to say which Pokemon game, but I would say a Pokemon game for sure. One of the more recent ones, maybe. I would say Chrono Trigger, definitely. I think that you're right, Super Mario RPG, just because it's so accessible and so fun. There's just a lightheartedness to it that's just and the music absolutely slams. It's so good. I would weirdly say, taking from SMT, maybe even on the kind of like Dragon Quest XI side, I would say Persona 5. I just think that there's a lot of people. It's a very atypical JRPG just because of how it's arranged.
It has like this,
and I wouldn't also say that it's
social element
easy, but I know a lot of people out there kind of have gotten into that game and maybe weren't fans of JRPGs in the past and really liked
a few examples,
and really liked what that game was putting out and went, I didn't know these could be like this, and I think that maybe opened.
I think that happened to a lot of people with the release of 5.
Yeah, and so I think that 5 can be on there too. I think honestly, I want to do something like, say, like Final Fantasy IX, because I think it's the best example of maybe what Final Fantasy has to offer to somebody new, because it's kind of like a throwback game. But I also think that people who have been playing Final Fantasy for a long time get the most out of 9 because of all of those same references. So I weirdly think like I would still put 7 on that list, because it's pretty quintessential. This is what the 90s JRPG scene was about after the PlayStation came out. Like, this was pretty much what everybody was trying to do.
But does being quintessential mean that it's a great entry point? Like, okay, so here's a funny variation. Yeah, okay, but I think it's a little different. Like, I would assume that you were predisposed to like games, to like, I was gonna say a fantasy setting, but I guess FF7 is more like a kind of like a cyberpunk setting.
Yeah,
but I don't know. I mean, whatever. I mean, I would assume that you already had the roots of like, of something like that planted within you. Okay, so what I want to say is like, maybe Final Fantasy VII is like the best candidate for like newcomer to the genre's second JRPG.
Okay,
like one thing to grease the wheels, sure, and then something to be quintessential.
Sure. Okay, I'll buy that. Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, then if I had to recommend a game to somebody that's not 7, but I think has an excellent heartfelt story,
you're gonna say 9.
9, very good combat. Like, I've told you a bunch of times that my favorite's 10, but 10 is a weird game, and I don't know that it's a good introduction, because I think
I've tried so many times to like 10, and it's always been a struggle for me.
Well, the other thing about 10 is, I mean, okay, here's the thing that 9 has going for it, and I mean this in the nicest way possible. It was that perfect Final Fantasy game where they finally figured out how to localize something in a really competent way. Like, it was a very competent, very fun to read, well-made localization. And also there was no voice acting, because 10 was a competent localization, and the voice acting, sometimes it doesn't really do the job. And I don't know why. 12 was infinitely better on every account with that. I still personally like 10's battles and even kind of the story a little bit more. 12's great. If you like Star Wars a lot and you've never played a JRPG, play 12, but 12 is also a really weird JRPG to start with.
Yeah, like 12 is a game that's not that no other JRPG quite feels like. So it could introduce you to like the flow of the genre in terms of like how it moves between like combat and like exploration and story and cutscenes and boss fights. Like, it kind of has the structure of a JRPG, but it really doesn't play gameplay wise like anything else in the genre, even though it's indisputably only a JRPG. As weird as that is.
This is going to be a weird recommendation, but I've had a lot of friends who do not play JRPGs or anything like that, but they have super fond memories of playing Golden Sun on the Game Boy Advance. I know that you've talked a lot about this, but like,
that's true.
I honestly think that Golden Sun, for whatever reason, appealed to a ton of people who were at.
Can I make an unfortunate comment about Golden Sun that I feel like is sort of taking some of that credit away from it?
Yeah, 100%.
I think Golden Sun might have been in the right place at the right time for that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, I have super fond memories of it, but it's sometimes hard to go back to.
The Game Boy Advance got into a lot of people's hands for Pokemon and, like, the typical, like, Nintendo handheld sellers.
Sure.
And I think Golden Sun was one of those games that a lot of people bought because they were, like, looking for something to play on the Game Boy Advance, because they bought the whole Game Boy Advance for Pokemon.
It did look really well. Good, though. Really well.
Yeah.
It looked really good.
Like, I think that game, I almost want to say, like, that game's box art just kind of, like, was like, whoa, that looks like it would be really cool, and just,
I mean, the music slams.
Oh, no, I think okay, so to be clear, I think it's an excellent game. I'm just saying, I can't explain why so many people seem to have, like, played that game, even though they are not otherwise, like, deep sort of like JRPG fans, like, why that game? And so what I'm saying is, I think the answer to why that game is it was in the right place at the right time.
Totally.
Game Boy Advance had a decent install base, and I think that because of Pokemon, I think there was a lot of people that were looking for like more games to justify the purchase of the handheld, and that was one of those ones that was like, it was there on the shelf and everyone was saying it was good, so let me give that a try. It's sort of like what I think happened.
Yep. I'll buy that. Yep. Okay, so Golden Sun's maybe not on the list.
and I don't mean to take anything away from the quality of Golden Sun for that, but I don't know how heavily Golden Sun was marketed. Like I can't remember. I don't know, but like
recall either.
I kind of really do again think that it was in the right place at the right time, despite also being a good game. Yeah,
I think we got a kind of okay little short list there on the modern front. Obviously, Persona 5 and Dragon Quest 11 are not.
I'll concede that Dragon Quest 11, may be too long to.
I didn't mean
be
to
able to be like a universally applicable recommendation, but I think that game could have a pretty wide appeal and could make a good impression within its first 10 to 20 hours with the right type of people.
I 100% agree with you. I just think it takes its time, which is fine. It just requires a patient person. That's all.
Yeah, that's who you give. That's the one you give to the person that you know is patient. Yeah.
However, I would say that for modern day...
Or Persona 5.
For modern day JRPGs, those two games, I think, are the best examples of someone was like to me being like, I have a PlayStation 4. I want to play a JRPG. What should I play? I'd be like, okay,
yeah,
play Persona 5 or play Dragon Quest 11. And then if you want a taste of the old school, go on PSN and get either Final Fantasy 9, Final Fantasy 7, or Chrono Trigger. And that's what I would say.
In particular, I want to say that I did through the beginning of this, I want to make this like what game, or as it turned out, games. Like if somebody's like, I have a PC, I have a Switch, I have a PS4. Like, they just have like one thing and it's like a modern thing. Like, I'm not necessarily saying the game has to be multi-platform either. Like that's not really like fair to any of the games, but you know what I mean? Like is it on a modern platform?
What about Tales of Vesperia?
If you think
it's on everything.
If you think the person is really just not going to take to turn-based, then yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Also, you have to have a pretty high tolerance for anime stuff, because I know people go like Final Fantasy is like an anime game, but like Tales of Vesperia literally is like an anime game.
I don't know that many people who are into anime and like aren't at least gamers, but I think there is a fairly large contingent of people that are like into anime, but they also like only play games like League of Legends or Counter-Strike or like whatever their friends like ask them to play, and they don't like seek out things on their own. So if you're going to recommend, if you found that very specific audience and you were going to recommend to that person a game, a JRPG, then maybe Tales of Vesperia fits there too. But that's a pretty like small, I've known people like that. Like I had a friend in the past who was really into anime, and then like the only game that this person played was like League of Legends and like Overwatch. And I mean, I never recommended a JRPG to this individual, but yeah, I would say that like for that person, Tales of Vesperia would absolutely be the choice. And I have known have known of a couple of other people like that who are like into like sort of like modern kind of like core like esports types game, like the games that are you get talked into playing with your friends because they're like multiplayer or whatever.
Yeah.
And those are like the only types of games that they play. So like
action stuff would be good.
But they like anime. So like that exists. That's out there. As much as I want to say that anime and JRPGs have high crossover, like there are people who enjoy one and not the other. So
yeah.
Tales of Vesperia would be an excellent bridge for that.
Well, so let us know what you think would be a good game for someone starting off with a JRPG. You can hit us up on Twitter. Let us know. I'm curious.
If you were wondering, then I hope that we produced some good options.
Or
if you aren't into JRPGs, now you know.
Yeah, I gotta underline that despite us going back and forth on these, we highly recommend pretty much every game we mentioned. So like they're all great starting points. It just
absolutely.
If you're talking about the general non-RPG person looking to get into it, that's where the disagreements come up. But all of these games are fantastic. Give them the time of day if you can, because they're great. And with that, you want to move on to Backlog this week?
Yep.
All right. Here we go.
You know what it is, it's the Backlog.
All right, here we are in Backlog Land. I'm going first this week. Wait, I went first last week.
Did you really?
Yes.
Okay, I was just suggesting that you go first because you went first with the topic, and I think we've generally always kept that like, so that we back and forth. But I don't know. Whatever.
I'll go first. There's no real point in keeping to a strict schedule, because then you just had your topic. Okay.
Yeah, whatever.
I believe last week mine was Xenogears, which was a JRPG.
That's correct, yeah.
Along the same lines, JRPG, just because, okay, so we were playing, full disclosure, me and Ben were playing Final Fantasy 14 the other day, and we got to fight the end boss from the first Final Fantasy. And I was just like, okay, yeah, because so my introduction to Final Fantasy 1 was on Game Boy Advance. I had the Dawn of Souls game, and I played Final Fantasy 1. Also on that cart was Final Fantasy 2. And I bet you know where this is going. I didn't really beat it. I played like the first little bit of that game, and I just kind of didn't go back. It's a weird game. It's a weird game for a lot of weird reasons. You don't level up. That's cool. I don't mind that most of the time, except in this game, you level up stats by doing things, like getting hit.
It's almost kind of like, I think the first game that I ever played where you like exclusively like gain in something by doing like only that thing. Well, I mean,
it's like Elder Scrolls.
To me, I want to say is like RuneScape.
Oh, okay.
Like in RuneScape, you train attack, which is the stat that determines your accuracy by using an accurate
attacking
style. Well, like, yeah, by attacking, but specifically, like, you have different attack styles in the game. So by using an attack style that focuses on accuracy.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Or like, yeah.
So. Right. So in this game, you can hit your own characters and give them more health, which is weird and exploitable. Very
similar concept, yeah.
You can, and then if you want to double dip, you can cast magic on your own characters to increase the person who's casting the magic on them's magic ability, while also increasing the people who are getting roasted by fires health. This seems cool. It is.
So do you just go into a low-level encounter where the enemies won't like kill you off
if
for
you spend
doing
like
this?
2 hours at the start of the game grinding, you can like offset it by a hilarious amount. I don't know how well that can carry you through the whole game, but I've definitely done that a couple of times when I've played it.
Okay.
So I really want to finish it though.
Well, you do stuff like that with 8.
Yeah, well, eight's different. It's just fun getting the Lionheart on disc 1 before you do anything. It's entertaining to me. But that, by the way, as an aside, I have a file of Final Fantasy VIII where I was just about to do, I think, the Dalit mission. So that's like the first kind of like seed mission.
I don't even know what that means. So,
anyways,
I know the least about 8 out of any of them, except for 2. Maybe I know less about 2 than 8. But
okay, so what I'm going to tell you is basically what happened was I think all I had was the first 3 GFs in that game. And then I played the card game until I had all of the pieces required to build Squall's final weapon on disc 1.
That's so interesting. There's so much in common with this and RuneScape because people. One of the things people do first in RuneScape is get GFs.
Okay. Oh God.
I'm so sorry. I couldn't help myself.
All right. But that takes.
I'm sorry.
That took me 20 hours of grinding that card game. So I have a file that's basically like an hour into the game in story, but 20 hours into actually playing it before I actually did anything. Not the point. I'm not trying to brag about Final Fantasy VIII. I just think no. Yeah, bringing it back to Final Fantasy II is that kind of weird dedication is dumb. Final Fantasy VIII was my first Final Fantasy game. That's why I have a weird love for it, and we'll do stuff like that in it. But But with 2, I don't have that. I don't hate 2. I actually kind of am into it because it's like you're a ragtag bunch of rebels taking down the Empire. It's very Star Warsian, but also feels a lot like 4. It feels like Proto 4 because I've played 3 on the DS, and 3 feels like 1. It feels like a sequel to 1 because it has the jobs.
2.0.
Yeah, it feels like it has the jobs and it has the grand evil and the going around to all the temples and the crystals. So 3 feels very related to 1, but 2 specifically feels like Proto 4 because 2 has a very distinct narrative and it has like evil minions and betrayals and underground factions and prison breakouts and all of that kind of narrative FF stuff that you get in 4 and 6 and 7. You know what I mean? And it started in my mind in 2. And I've just never really given it a solid run through. And I think it would be fun to try. But honestly, its battle system is just weird enough. It's not impossible by any means. Lots of people have beaten it. It's just weird enough that I've never really gotten into it. And I think I want to give it a go. I also don't think it's that long. I think it's kind of on the like 20, 25 hour range. Like pretty standard.
I'm so sorry. I'm just cracking up.
Cracking up about what? What did I say?
Literally nothing.
What are you laughing at? Are you still laughing at your RuneScape joke?
Yes.
Oh my god.
And it's so dumb. I'm so sorry. Okay. So what I want to ask you is,
Yep.
do you think you would do something like what you did with 8, where you like power leveled early, if you played 2 now and then went back and played 2 in like 20 years when it means something to you because you have nostalgia for it again? Like, do you think that would happen to you in the future if you went for a second playthrough in the deep future? Like, is that a thing that you do? That you just do to it, like?
Not usually, no. 8's special. Okay. Also, I think I made a mistake. I don't think it's. I think you need to do a little bit more than what I said to get the Lionheart. Right, you do. Sorry, the earliest you can get the Lionheart is by the time you get to Galbadia Garden. So sorry, I was wrong. You can get the Lionheart on disc 1, but you have to do a little bit of the game first. But the majority of that grinding is done at the very start. I just want to clarify so nobody ats me saying that I was wrong and you can't just get it with 3 GFs. You do need to get almost all the way to Galbadia Garden.
Okay.
So now I remember, it's all in my mind, but you can get Lionheart before the end of disc 1, and it's rad. But that's not the point. The point is that I get off topic and I want to play Final Fantasy 2. That's the point.
That's a great choice for backlog.
Yep. How about you? What do you got going on this week?
I got Dragon Quest.
Ooh, which one? 4?
I'm thinking. I'm still trying to decide which Dragon Quest game to play next.
Do 7. I think you would really like 7.
I think I still want to finish Rocket Slime. I don't want Rocket Slime to be a game that I started and didn't finish. Hey. So Rocket Slime is on my backlog, but I want to focus more on which mainline Dragon Quest game to play next.
Play 7.
And so I've been thinking about 7, but I've been thinking about 5, and I kind of fired up 5 and toyed around with the first hour.
I have not played 5, so I can't comment on it. I've heard 5 is excellent.
I honestly think I kind of want to play 5 because it's on the SNES, and I just want to play a SNES game.
Sure.
But
man,
I have some SNES games on the go that I should really be finishing up, like FF5 and Earthbound, and I'm just mired in backlog.
That's why I made this section.
5 or
That's
7, yeah. 7 I've heard is like a really long game.
I beat that one.
But I love the concept from what I've heard about it.
7 is just a cool game.
I've heard that all Dragon Quest games are relatively episodic with your visit to each town or whatever, but what I've heard is that 7 is maybe the best execution of it being episodic because you see like the fruits of your labor more at each place because 100%. Of like the way that the game is structured and how much and I've also heard that each like sort of arc is like more isolated from each other so that they really all stand on their own.
7 also does this really awesome thing where the first 20 hours of that game are not like the back 40.
Okay.
And it's in a really good way. That's I promise that's not spoilers. It's just that game just does if you want to talk about slow setup but like satisfying payoff, that game rewards you for hanging out with it, and I just think it's really well done. I do think if I had to criticize a Dragon Quest game for being too long, which seems mean because I think lots of people would say they're all maybe a little too long, 7 is literally the longest game.
Right.
So
that's okay though.
Like I didn't grind it, and I played the 3DS remake to the end.
That'd be the version.
Didn't do super dungeons or anything like that. Just played the game pretty much straight up. I didn't do the monster collecting, so I skipped out on a lot of the side questy kind of stuff. But I did the main scenario, and I did some side stuff. And my game playthrough was straight out like 72 hours. And I grinded all of my characters to level 99 and did a lot of the side stuff in 11, and my playthrough was mid 80s. So like I easily skipped out on like 20, 30 hours of stuff. Yeah. You could easily get 100 hours of Dragon Quest 7 and not bat an eye.
And you could have been finished 11 in less time, is what you're saying too, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. 7 is by far the longest Dragon Quest game. But it is, if you treat it like a really long TV show, it's great. It's great. You get your money's worth with that game, like 100%. I can't recommend it enough.
Right. Okay.
The 3DS version is also really good because that's that perfect mix where, like, unlike the 8 remake, which was trying to do like a PS2 look on the 3DS, which is okay, but the resolution of the 3DS isn't the same as the PS2, so it obviously looks not quite as good. 7 looks like an upgrade from the PS1 game and also has quality of life improvements. It is a fantastic looking 3DS game. So 7 is this weird mix where it's a visual and gameplay improvement over its original version while also being perfectly suited for the hardware it's on. Whereas 8 is technically a downgrade port, which is impressive and still very worthwhile. But 7's like a step up.
I was able to get the patch for 8 that puts the orchestral version from PS2 8 into 3DS 8. It's like a patch that you can apply to the game if you soft mod your 3DS.
You mean the orchestral version from, I think it was the Japanese release, because I'm pretty positive the North American release of Dragon Quest 8 on PS2 had
also
MIDI.
had okay, yeah, it may be from the Japanese release then. It simultaneously is also an undub.
Oh.
And I don't know if it was possible to get one without the other, because what I saw was it was just one patch that you apply. So
okay.
That's the version I will be playing if I play 8. That's for 8, because I want that orchestral score, and I don't mind listening to Japanese voiceover instead.
Oh.
It's still like English text.
On the note
so
of orchestral scores for Dragon Quest games, if you do decide to play Dragon Quest 11 as your Dragon Quest game, play the definitive version on anything it's offered on, because I'm pretty sure the definitive version has orchestral across the board, whereas the original PlayStation 4 release only has MIDI, and the orchestral score is so much better.
Yeah.
That's the end of that public service announcement. I just thought you reminded me of that, and I was like, that's actually a super important
I'm basically
caveat.
pursuing the same thing with that aforementioned 3DS patch. So that's what I would do for 8, but I want to pick 7 or 5.
I don't think you can go wrong with either.
5 is the one that I've heard is like the sort of like the more old school, like the Japanese fan favorite. So I kind of want to see what the buzz is about.
I've heard that it's also a really great entry point for the series because it's not quite as hardcore as the old ones, but also like very good and rooted in that old style.
Right. I've already
although you have 4
taken
on
my
DS
entry point, but
4 on DS is really well done. That game is fantastic.
Gotta admit, there's something about playing a core DS game on the 3DS that I don't love. And I think it has something to do with it, like not filling the frame, even though DS screens would be a similar size to like what a DS game is presented as on a 3DS screen. So like, I don't know what my problem is.
Right.
But for some reason it's fine, but it feels, I don't know. It's weird because I'm putting a DS card in, and I know that the native hardware to run a DS game is present in a 3DS. Like that's like documented. Like we know that, but because it just like feels strange. It feels like emulation or something to me. Even like not in terms of like lagginess or anything, but it feels like it's not native to that platform because either I'm pillar boxed on the top screen and filled on the bottom screen, but it's not an integer scale resizing, so you get that like really ugly artifacting. Mm-hmm. Or you hold start when you launch the game and it's pixel perfect, but then it's like really small on the screens, and which I prefer to go pixel perfect, but it's it just feels weird. It kind of when I play my DS games on the 3DS, it kind of makes me wish I just had like a nice condition like DS Lite or something.
Man, I just play them on my small 3DS and everything's fine.
Well, you still have the aspect ratio difference of the top screen, and
yeah, I know, but
you still have the zoom and not zoom situation. Yeah,
true.
That's all actually still applicable, but
it's not as pronounced.
Perhaps not as pronounced. But 4. It's over there. It's on the shelf. So maybe 4, 5, or 7. I don't know anything about them. Maybe what I would like to do, because I sort of know the gist of like a little bit of the styling of like what kind of an adventure 7 is in that sense. I'd like to see if I can find like a spoiler-free like back of the box text for like 4 and 5 type of thing. Yeah.
Just Google the
I mean, I could
DS.
literally go. Well, I could literally go pick up the back of the box of 4. It's right there. I haven't even read it. You know what I mean? And just see what it says, and maybe weigh that up against what I know about 7, and then make a decision.
Yeah, man.
But Rocket Slime I got to finish Rocket Slime first. I really don't want to, because I know Dragon Quest games are big, and I really don't want to go deep in one without finishing Rocket Slime, because I actually really like Rocket Slime and have been enjoying it, and so I don't want to let it get
backlog
waylaid.
pick is Rocket Slime.
The true barrier in the back, well, you know how we actually tend to hit on like, so why is this game on your backlog, and why haven't you got to it yet? So maybe the why haven't I got to a new mainline Dragon Quest is because I want to finish Rocket Slime first. You know what I mean? So it's the barrier.
Yeah.
But the spotlight here is on which mainline Dragon Quest game.
Also, finishing a Dragon Quest game makes you kind of not necessarily want to jump into another one right away. I know that I'm still...
it's an undertaking.
After 11, I was just like, I need a break from this for a couple months, at least.
Yeah. It's been like over a year for me since I finished 11.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. These were some great picks this week. I guess we'll move into the farewells now. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, it does. Absolutely, it does.
So we're still going to be streaming Snester Days. Look out for that. We'll tweet about it. You can find us, by the way, at TPCC_podcast. Give us a follow. Be one of our first followers. We have no reward for you, except for the fact that we will...
Well, if you want to know about what we're up to.
Yeah, we just tweet about what we're doing. We'll tweet when we're streaming about Snester Days. We'll tweet when new episodes come up. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you think the best Dragon Quest game for Ben to start with is. Are we not considering?
Yeah, if you have advice, I guess, maybe this is an open ask for advice. So.
Let them know. And if you have any advice for Final Fantasy 2 for me, let me know as well, because that's literally like a blind playthrough. Like, I really don't know much about that game at all.
Same. I'd like to get around to that too.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it more. I'm kind of curious. Maybe I'll boot it up. But for now, we'll say goodbye. Thanks for listening, as always. We're closing in on our first double-digit episode. So excited.
It's very exciting.
Very exciting indeed. And
a milestone.
Yeah, totally. Like, it is. You know, it's maybe it's a small milestone, but I think it's good. I think it's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks for listening, everybody. And as always, this podcast cannot continue.